But for now, I'd like to introduce our first panel. We just heard from Dave about many mature Evergreen organizations, but someone had to start them. So our first panel is going to include 3 Evergreen founders. These leaders have the grit, resilience, and long-term vision to found their companies with purpose, to scale them at a paced rate, and to build the foundation of firms that will be here 100 years from now. Chris Reuter launched Spikeball in 2008. Today, the new sport has more than 15 million players, and the company has 41 full-time employees and hosts more than 150 tournaments per year. Chris's goal is to create the next global sport, and it sounds like he is well on his way. Carrie Van Winkle Greener is the great-granddaughter of bourbon legend Pappy Van Winkle. In 2013, she teamed up with her sisters to found Pappy & Company, a bourbon-inspired lifestyle brand founded on the principles of their family's legacy and heritage. The company has since grown into a well-rounded collection of culinary, home, bar, apparel, and gifts. Dan Kenary, CEO and co-founder of Mass Bay Brewing Company, will be moderating the panel. Mass Bay Brewing holds brewing license 001 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They opened their first brewery in Boston in 1986, and they also operate 2 breweries in Vermont. Please help me in welcoming to the stage Chris, Carrie, and Dan.
Good morning, everybody.
How many other jobs to do after Dave's presentation?
I know, Dave, that was...
Are we sold? I'm sold again.
It's great to be part of such an important movement. I love the way you tied it into millennials' views on capitalism, and we've got a job to do. And you're leading the way, Dave. And so we're just here to talk about some practical stories of how we started our companies with purpose and how we came to know the Evergreen movement and our thoughts and feelings about that. I'm sorry it's not an afternoon presentation because we could be enjoying some of our beverages up here, perhaps. But how about if we start with just hearing some stories about the founding of your companies and way back when?
Absolutely. Am I on here? So I'll speak up. Yes, so I started Spikeball in 2008. I did not invent it. I brought it back to life. So it was originally launched in 1989 when I was about 14 years old. And one of my buddies randomly bought it at a local toy store, brought it back to the neighborhood. We fell in love with it, and we're playing it on and off over the years. And from what little we understood, it launched in 1989 and was killed in 1991. So poor little guy didn't even make it to its 2nd birthday. But we kept playing on and off over the years, and strangers would always walk up and ask us about it, and they seemed into it, and we still loved it. So it took quite a while, but light bulb finally went off, and was like, I wonder if we could actually bring this thing back to life. So that's what we did. My brother, my cousin, and 3 or 4 other childhood friends and I, we chipped in friends and family round, so it was about a total of $100,000. And relaunched in 2008. I ran it on my own for about 5 years as a night job. You know, of that $100,000, I think 40,000 went to the first 1,000 sets. And yeah, still had a day job and wife and kids and, a lot of responsibility, so I couldn't quit and go full time. So, at the time I worked for Microsoft, and I am forever grateful to Bill Gates. He doesn't know, but he actually helped fund a lot of the early days of Spikeball, which I was very grateful for. So essentially 2 full-time jobs for 5 years, and Spikeball eventually grew to be big enough. In 2013, we hit $1 million in annual sales with 0 full-time employees, and that's when my wife and I agreed it was okay to quit the day job and go full-time. That was by far one of the greatest days of my life. And yeah, we've been growing ever since.
So, as you all probably have learned, my family's in the bourbon business. I'm 4th generation. And so, about 9 years ago, I decided to just get involved in my own way. So, I had this great heritage, and I was inspired to create my own brand. So, with my sisters in 2009, we started in my sister's basement. And we each invested $6,000. So a lot of people think, too, just with the big name of our family's business, Pappy Van Winkle, that potentially I would just be able to be handed a job, or I would have the funds to go out and create a big company from the start. And so it's actually the exact opposite. My dad, I can get into that later, but he had to start from scratch because his family's company, Stitzelweller Distillery, had to sell in 1972, which is another inspiring thing to why we want to do business this way, because they had to sell. But yeah, so we started in our basement with each $6,000 times 3 sisters, and we've just grown from there. And now we've gone into our 3rd building, and we're based in Louisville, Kentucky. And what started from just a simple concept of a way for us to get in the business has really grown into something extra special. Of more, we're driven by this whole concept of Evergreen and the 7 Ps, which are crazy daily. We just can see those in the way we run our business, and it's just that's the thing that is driving us forward now, more so even just than the products and creating this brand. It's really just all the things that come with having that special family business to carry on into future generations. And so it's just so amazing and exciting to be in Evergreen and to have this organization. I was laughing on our call when we started talking about this with Annie, that I hope I don't sound like a talking billboard for the Tugboat Institute, but it's just an amazing place to be and to be able to really solidify all of these ideas and what we do as business owners, but also a family business owner, that this is a legit way of doing business. And we now get the tools and the inspiration and the foundation to be able to really grow it and see towards the future.
Thank you. That's great. And we started our business in 1986 before there was craft beer. We were called microbreweries back then, for those of you old enough to know that. And we came at it from the frustrated consumer point of view. People say, you're a home brewer. I'm like, no, I just was a frustrated consumer who loved beer, and there was no choice coast to coast really in the United States. It was all light yellow lagers. So we all pursued dreams, and I think it's interesting, we raised $430,000 from 35 individuals. That's how we raised our money. And I think something that, Dave alluded to earlier, for those of you who are budding entrepreneurs or future entrepreneurs out there, that these decisions you make kind of early on in your business are really important. Like if you go that private equity route early, you can never get off that trail, or you can never get off it easily. You'll be shoved off it at some point. But we all made the decision, $430,000 from individuals, $18,000 if I did my math right, and $100,000 from friends and family to kind of launch. And we could talk at some point about how much additional capital was needed or not over the years to reinforce Dave's point. But thinking back to when you made the decision, why did you decide to go the Evergreen route? Why was that important to you?
Well, for me, it was honestly all I knew. It was the only way we knew how to think. And again, it's just so fun to have the legitimacy now to know how to really do it. And so, thinking back at the very beginning of my dad's career, he had to think, his company, like I said, sold in 1972. So what he started was from scratch. And so he never wanted to be in that position again, to have to sell the family business. And so I think that was inspiring to me, to make sure that I wanted to kind of be that love letter to my dad. I think my dad probably wanted to be that love letter to his father, who was put in that situation. So it was an easy decision. It was the only thing I knew.
I think mine was driven by my jobs prior to Spikeball. So, worked for big companies like Microsoft, publicly traded, and then teeny tiny Bay Area venture-backed. And, the venture-backed companies, very sexy, and they get the TechCrunch headlines about how many millions they've raised. And, once you raise that money, you, of course, go have a huge party and celebrate that you still haven't made any money, but you sure got some, so screw it, let's have a party. Had a few of those stock option jobs that, as Dave mentioned, my millions didn't turn into that. So when I did start Spikeball, it never crossed my mind, because I didn't think any sort of, quote, real institution would actually give me money. But I had zero control at those day jobs. I was an employee, and the culture wasn't that great. When I started running Spikeball, sitting at my desk in my living room at midnight on a Tuesday, I was making decisions, and that like chills up my spine at that midnight at Tuesday. Like, wait, I have control here. I actually get to decide what the product is going to look like or whatever, and that was such a foreign thing to me. And I had talked to others and experienced others that had raised money, and you lose a lot of that control. So that control was like intoxicating to me. And not that I want control over others, but I want control over me and my time and what I get to do. And a big fear was and is, if you go raise a bunch of money, do you lose that control? And while I don't have experience raising a bunch of money, I've read plenty of articles where it sounds like that's a real risk.
It's interesting, too, talking about values, which Dave mentioned earlier. You mentioned your father, and I think back to my father, who was a stockbroker, as he used to call them, Dave, for 65 years of his life. But I'm from Worcester, Massachusetts, a small city in central Massachusetts, and he would talk about having his prime job to be protecting his clients from those bastards on Wall Street. And he was just an incredibly principled person who talked about, how the dangers of greed, and how greed can undermine people's support for our system. And so the values, when I thought about starting our company, it really was never about that quick exit, quick buck. It was really about creating something of value and bringing employees along the way, right? So when you all have done the same thing, and can you give some examples of like where you made decisions, maybe they were tough decisions in your businesses to be consistent with your evergreen values?
Sure, I'll go. So one of our bigger customers is Walmart. It's this retailer based in Arkansas, if you haven't heard of it. But when we first went into their stores, I forget what the initial order was, but let's say it was going to be, 10,000 units. And that's what we agreed to. And then their buyer, at the last minute, called our sales guy and said, "Hey man, I think there's a way I can actually like triple that. I think we can probably do 30,000 units. Like, let's do this." And Ken, our head of sales, reached out to me and he said, "Chris, here's the opportunity." And most salespeople you think would be slapping high fives and be like, "Dude, I just tripled, like this is amazing." But Ken came to me and said, "I don't think we should do it." Like, what? I agreed with him, but I was like, a salesperson coming and saying that. And he said, "This is a huge risk. If it doesn't go well, holy smokes, are we in some trouble? So let's stick with the 10,000. We're confident in our product that they're going to call back and order more, but it's actually not Walmart that will be deciding whether they're going to order more. It's the consumer, right? So the consumer, we're confident is going to go in there. But let's not get over our skis and risk a whole bunch by shipping way too much with such an unproven partner here." And that's what we did. And they've been great partners ever since, and we've been growing. But I don't think if I had a board or investors that, I probably would have had to bring that decision to them. I got a feeling they would have said, "Grab the money while you can, let's do this." And, that sort of short-term versus long-term thinking. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty good example of sort of how evergreen businesses will act in that situation.
So when we were brand new and green, I quickly found Evergreen, thankfully, because I lived in Sun Valley. And so I connected with Dave, and I was just such a newbie, and I still feel like a newbie. I'm so green, and I've been doing this for 9 years, but I still will not call myself a business person. I'm definitely the more creative person in the company, and I have the vision and the inspiration, and then I have people around us who really can help hone all that in and create the success in our business. But I quickly learned through the 7 Ps and all of the resources through Evergreen, even with the family business consulting aspect of my other larger family business, of needing to really start thinking about the transition and the multi-generational aspect. And so I just found very quickly that I needed to create the tools and the foundation and how to do that. So even though we're still a really small company, I feel like our foundation and all of the resources that we provide for our people and our team are so solidified that we are kind of doing things the opposite way, potentially, of like growing so quickly and then, getting ahead of yourself and flailing, which there was plenty of flailing for sure, because we were such a small team. And yeah, there's always going to be that. We still flail in lots of ways, but it was just so important. So we, like, before we even really got into more marketing hires, we actually hired HR and operations, like shoring up our back end. And then the people, we had an amazing small team, but the dynamics were just off. We were realizing that we were not good managers, even though, I mean, part of it was being in a family business where we treated everybody like family, which is amazing. And that's totally was the foundation for what we're now building out as our culture. But it kind of started to get in the way because we were all so close that there were the dynamics that potentially, there was some taken advantage of because we were friends, or gave them too much. Freedom's not the right word, but so having HR and operations come in and help us with those team dynamics, everything from the weekly team calls where we can ask our teammates what they're thankful for on a personal level, not just about the business, and then just little things like that that have just been such a integral part of our growth and success. And other examples of through Tugboat, learning about the great game of business early on, and open book management, where a lot of our employees, they saw that we were just rolling in the dough. The orders were just coming in. Most of our business is e-commerce, and so to them on the outside, it looked like, wow, these girls are just killing it. And then once we opened our books, even though we were transparent, we lived that culture, but to really show them the numbers and the bottom line, and that what they contributed made a difference on every level of the company, that even the person packing the boxes to myself, that we were all equals and we all had an important role to play. And so all of those little things, even like working on the DISC profiles with team members, there's different dynamics of personalities, and so to find that person that you work with who usually maybe is very difficult, to see that, they're just a driver. They have that dominant personality. You can't take it personally, and so you can communicate that level of within the team. And so those types of things were just so important for me. And so now we are really positioned to take ourselves to the next 100 years because we've set all of those strong core values.
It's interesting how often you can fall back on that, and then you think of the alternative if you didn't have it. In 2014, my partner wanted to sell the company to private equity or to a strategic buyer, and I didn't want to do that. And so we made the decision to borrow money and buy him out and give 48% of our company to our employees and become an ESOP. And that certainly was part of my Evergreen journey, and I want to talk in a second about when you kind of found out about Tugboat and the light bulb going off, because I remember when I see Dave putting that Theranos Inc. magazine up, that's why I'm in Tugboat. I was on an airplane reading Inc., which I've done forever, and read the article by Bo about this group of people out in Sun Valley, Idaho, and I never forget turning to my wife and saying, my God, I found my tribe. Because it was about people that cared way more about building something of enduring value and sharing that with employees and others, as opposed to the get rich quick and cash out. And it was very powerful for me. And then I think forward, we did that deal, by the way, I'm not that bright, at exactly the wrong time. When we started, there were about 100 breweries in the country. Now it's over 10,000. And so it was about top of the market when I took on all that debt. And it's been a struggle. And I tell people that we were with the workout group of our banks before COVID hit. And then we lost 35% of our business overnight. And so you're like, why are you still up here? And it's because of the values we built into our business, so that when we had to pull together as a company and say, we're confronting this, we're going to confront this together. I can't imagine having done it not as an evergreen company, you know, and as a private, we'd be so gone if we were a private equity business. I can say we've paid down, we had 70 million of debt, we've paid it down to 11 million. So we've made tremendous progress together, and it kind of come out the other side of it, I think, a lot stronger, but it all gets back to, you know, the evergreen values that we've all come to in our own very different ways. So when did you, kind of the light bulb go off, Chris, for you about finding Tugboat and hearing the story?
My story is almost identical to yours. It was reading that magazine on an airplane, and I remember trying to fill out the application on the Tugboat site on the flight. Internet wasn't really working, so I had to wait the painfully long, like 90 minutes to land. It's like going through my mind is like, oh my God, everybody's reading this article. They're going to be flooded with applications. I'm not going to get in, so I got to be one of the first. And but yeah, it was a similar found my tribe, found my people, and one of our values at Spikeball is the challenge of status quo, and I feel that us Evergreen business owners, managers, and Tugboat members, we do that. You know, I do feel, unfortunately, right now that the status quo is, oh, you're starting a business? Oh, I guess that means I have to go raise money. For some people, that may be appropriate, but if I had the magic wand, I'd love people at least to consider the alternative. So yes, we did raise money, but it was, friends and family, and I maybe could have gone and raised a ton more money where I could have quit my day job on day one and gone, but I had those 5 really long years to take the time to fail and to learn and all that. So if I had raised money, I think a gun would have been to my head saying, grow, grow, grow right now. And, in 2008, our revenue was $10,882. And I couldn't have been more proud of that. That was $10,882 more dollars than we had the year prior. But what kind of investor would be pumped with $10,882? I did have to buy my brother, cousin, and those friends some beers and pizzas over that year and the years following to keep them happy, but now they're pretty psyched. I wouldn't have had that time. I love that Jeff Bezos line of, it takes 5 to 7 years to really let things incubate and kind of bake. Yeah, I think that time was a huge, huge benefit that we had that a lot of other businesses don't.
Your Tugboat moment? Or I guess you live in
I
Sun
feel
Valley.
like I've already
How about-
said it a lot of times. Like it was very early on.
It's really helped you since you started your company, really.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just imperative. And the 7 Ps, it's just so cool, too, that to think about when Dave created those, how strong he knew that those were and how evergreen those words were and that they will last. They've lasted for the last, I think I've been in this organization for 6 years, and they're still just as important, and they will evolve with you over time, for the next 100 years.
I know a number of folks in our industry, and you would know some of these names if you follow craft beer, who've lost their businesses to private equity. And as I describe it to people, and again, some of my best friends are in private equity, so I have to be very careful. But if you hit a home run, or a grand slam or a home run as an entrepreneur, you're going to be okay in your private equity-backed company. Anything less than a home run, you're going to lose. If, God forbid, it's a single or double, you're out of the company with nothing. And I've seen, successful craft beer brands that have been taken away from the entrepreneur. They didn't know what a ratchet was, for example. We didn't hit that 2 times within 3 years, so they got all the rest of the stock. So going into it with your eyes wide open, and I'm sure you probably have examples of that as well. Everyone hears about the huge grand slam that's 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 1,000. You don't hear about the rest. I'm always on the side of the entrepreneur. And I think it's really important to recognize that when you bring investors in, that if it's private equity, they're really not on your side. They are for a short time, but they have very different objectives than you do for the most part. And you brought in friends and family. We did too. Carrie, your sisters. Just how important that has been to your success that you've had people in your corner. As you face it, Chris, I know you're facing some challenges right now, for example. Can you imagine dealing with a restive board?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'd much rather negotiate with my brother than a big, PE firm that is essentially, broad generalizations, but I feel like the professional investors treat the business as essentially a spreadsheet, and how can you optimize it? And that may not be fair to all, but that's kind of my general take. But yeah, like, when COVID hit, outdoor recreation was the industry that benefited the most. We thought we went into 2020 thinking we were going to grow maybe 15%, which was kind of our normal trajectory, and we nearly doubled the business that year. Awesome, right? Everybody's high-fiving. Holy smokes, are we going through that hangover right now? So if you've seen any of the headlines of Walmart, Target, et cetera, everybody has way too much inventory. Consumer spending habits changed overnight in April. So they called us end of last year, saying, hey, here's our 2022 forecasts. It's going to be a great year. Let's go. So we called our factory and we ordered a ton of inventory. And then they all called us back in April and May and said, slam on the brakes. We don't need any of that stuff. So we've got all this inventory. We're having a tough time paying the factories right now. Consumers are spending their money on other stuff. Recession? Are we in one? Is it coming? I don't know, but definitely not clear, sunny skies up ahead. So we're trying to figure it out. I'm confident we will. But I got a feeling if I were having to send reports to somebody that had the ability to take control from me, that would have been done a long time ago. And actually, probably in 2020, I'm guessing I would have been forced to sell because everything was up and to the right and beautiful and fantastic. And we're an interesting business in that it's a consumer product. It's the plastic net and rubber ball. But that's not what makes us special. We're trying to create a legitimate new sport. A little over a month ago, I was in Belgium for our first ever World Championship tournament. We had 31 countries competing in Belgium that flew from all over the world. I'm standing there watching Japan play Mexico. Like, how mind-boggling is that? I'm jumping on an airplane in about 2 hours to fly to Austin for our U.S. National Championship this weekend. But if you just look at a spreadsheet, the tournaments do nothing for us. It's selling the actual product. So I have a feeling that would be the narrow lens. The investor would say, okay, let's eliminate this whole sport thing. But the sport is what drives the sales of the product. And I got a feeling if I weren't in control and I had others that were only looking at the spreadsheets, then our secret sauce, what makes us special, would get tossed to the side.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar situation to Chris in regards to during COVID, our business was up 76% when normally our pace growth was an ideal 20%, was pushing it a little. It was like, do we really want to say 20%? 10 felt a little modest, so like 15. So we just saw a crazy amount of growth. And then, is my mic on? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then after COVID, this past year, our sales have been down for the first time in 9 years. But the way we get to think long term, if we were thinking short term, we'd have to be pivoting and reactionary, and those things to me would just dilute our brand and everything that we've built. And so to be able to think that we are riding a wave versus having to make huge transitions now, potentially, our brand is not a sales type of brand. And so, to think that if we were forced to potentially do a lot of sales or fire people, like we've just lived within our means in our company, just like you hope to do as an individual. And so it's really, thank God for it. I can't imagine the level of stress if, for one, someone else was having to tell me how to deal with this situation. But yeah, I'm so thankful for that. What else was I going to say?
We're going to open it up to questions in a minute. I think what I'd like to end on is just the why. Like, if you were advising entrepreneurs to be, why should they choose this path, which at times can be a lot harder, and longer term as far as the payoff. Why should they do that? Take on that extra burden, if you will.
Well, for me, it's like even going beyond the 7 Ps and just as an individual and as a person. I mean, we can talk about the business stuff all day long, and obviously Dave did a great example of showcasing that, but just the people part of who you are as an individual, I find that that's the why for me, because I know that I want to have a successful personal life, have a functional family where you're try to have great communication, you can show gratitude, and have the most fulfilling life possible. We only have this one life. And so to me, on a very high level, that's totally relates to running a company. And we all know how much your work and your family life can't really separate themselves. So it's like you want to be happy and healthy in work just as you do at home. And so for me, this is a way to do that. And I love to the Tugboat organization because all those people I feel like are same in that way where we strive to have healthy family lives, and we have children that we can talk about and spouses that we appreciate, and just we just love life and we care about people. And so I feel like that is my huge why. There's lots of other things that that 100% everything he said I agree with, but that's just a high level perspective.
Yeah, I'd say for me, it's a sense of pride for working for the company. Working with our whole team, which I absolutely love. I love walking by a park and seeing 4 strangers playing our product, and I have seen or heard of proposals taking place at our tournaments. In Paris a month or 2 ago, a guy, while in the middle of the tournament, dropped and pretended that he had broken his ankle. Girlfriend runs up, "You okay? You okay? Will you marry me?" I mean, just money, right? Like, that's smooth. I have seen logos tattooed on arms. Last week, Conan O'Brien was walking around Yale University and started playing spike ball with some kids. And he's diving and getting at it and yelling into the camera. And that kind of, it's just fun. And I've also talked to a lot of people that have not gone this route. They've sold their business. They get the mountain of cash. They buy the house, the Ferrari, or whatever. And don't get me wrong, that stuff sounds awesome. But they're depressed. After, they don't have that reason to get up and to do whatever it is that makes them them. And I have gone through some exercises trying to think like, okay, what does post-spike ball life look like for me? And I don't. It's blank right now. Like, I probably need a little more work-life separation. But I love it right now. My mom still clips random articles of spike ball stuff that her friends send her, and that's cool. So yeah, there's this sense of pride of being involved and knowing that I had there's also couples that have met through spike ball and that got married and had kids, and knowing that I had a teeny tiny something to do with those 2 people meeting each other, that's pretty real.
It's hearing both of you talk about values and the joy and the pride that you get. Values are central to all of us. And if you want to live a life of purpose and live out your values, if you choose the other route, if you bring in outside money to fund your business, that business is not going to be run on your values for long. It just doesn't happen. And so, listen, we had an incredible couple of days at OC Tanner, and hearing Dave talk about, at the end of the day, talking about what he's looking for with people. He said, all this other stuff, it's integrity and character. And there's a 95-year-old startup that has lived by its values forever, and it's what an example for us to live that as well. But you don't want that dividing line between your values. I act this way at work. That's my work self, and here's my home self, and there's never the two shall meet. And being able to keep our businesses, private, evergreen businesses, there doesn't have to be that split, which is so powerful.
Yeah, it's just doing business in a real way and, an authentic way. We want to be authentic people, and so it just makes sense to do business in that same way.
Absolutely. So we'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has any questions. Yes. I'll answer quickly for us. You can still, repeat the question. As an Evergreen company, do we face particular challenges, competing against private equity backed where lots of options can be offered, et cetera? We can still offer, shares of equity in our company. So we're able to compete. It's a bit of a longer term payback. And, folks get sold that, hey, look at this hockey stick. We can promise you, 5 times your money in 3 years. And we never make those kind of claims. I think we tend to attract, especially as an ESOP, employee-owned company, 48%, we tend to attract like-minded people that have our sense of mission. I think that's come across from the three of us, that it's not just about the dollars and cents. We love what we do, and we're on a mission as part of this Evergreen movement. So we tend to attract people that kind of share some of those values, which can be a plus.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I mean, we just can't worry about that part. It's because it's just not part of how it's going to be for us. But yeah, even we've heard when people read our bio when they're applying for a job, they immediately can see that they said that, like, oh, I can just tell your company's kind, and it just seems like an amazing place to work, just from us sharing what our values are about. For one, our first one is like, keep it fun, family focus, family always comes first. Like, so those things actually can take over, the money part. And we obviously want people to get paid well and have a great living, but there's so much more than that. And so I think people who come into our company realize that and know that that is a priority for them to have that quality of life, with also a potential for growth. But the other thing is too, is like, we found too, because we've bootstrapped our business, that, and it seems OC Tanner throughout the years is amazing at this, is really fostering their jobs throughout the company and the growth from a lower level position all the way up to vice presidents and executives. So for us, that's like definitely a way that we are naturally building our business, that people evolve in the company. And so even like our COO just started strictly as HR, and it's just how our business works that way.
Yeah, and I think we're not necessarily unique Evergreen businesses, but the fact that we have a consumer brand, the brands are a bit more known. So, I think that helps in our sort of job applicant flow. To answer your question on executives, I got super lucky with my COO. In the early days, I posted a $25 ad on a job board. We were still tiny. He was one of the only guys that actually applied, but still with us today. He's awesome. But everybody we've hired since then, I love the line I've heard, I don't know who told me, but you should hire, fire, and manage according to your values. And our values are very important at Spikeball. We review them once a year with the entire business. Everybody gets to raise their hand and say, I don't like that one, or I like that one, or let's change this a little bit. So there's a rigorous debate over them. I don't want our values to be something that just the leadership team wrote, publishes, and says, hey, everybody, we've got values. So we ask people about the values in the interview process. I want to make sure that they're on board with this and they don't think it's just some like poster in the hallway that we framed and hung up, if we actually had a physical office, which we don't. But yeah, trying to make sure that you're finding those long-term people. And I know another common, which I believe is a misconception of, millennials, they just job hop all the time. And vast majority of our business is millennials. And we've got people that have, the company's only 14 years old. We've only had full-timers for, I think, 8 of those. And we've got some people that have been with us like 7, 8 years. It's their first job out of college, and they're turning 30 and married and having kids and stuff, and still a single job. So I do not agree with that millennials are job hoppers and all that sort of a thing. And I think they're sticking around because we treat them right. And they also had that sense of pride when they just walk by a beach and see people playing. They're like, oh, I had something to do with that. So hopefully that comes close to answering your question.
Anything else? Thank you all very much. Oh yeah, sorry about that. One more right there.
So you brought up like several policy situations that might formulate in capitalistic markets, like maybe zero sum or negative sum. What are some things that we might be able to do to help curtail some of like the fat tail risks that may formulate in our capitalistic society, like whilst keeping the beauty of capitalism alive?
Man, that's a great question. I mean, if I understood it correctly, I think what we're doing in the Evergreen and the Tugboat Institute, what Dave's doing, trying to get this word out. I mean, when you really think about the amount of wealth that is flowing and being concentrated in this country right now with the PE model, within a democratic society, I think it's frightening. And this is just my opinion. The results will be the pendulum will swing way over here and hurt everybody. You know, because if the system's just working for a few, in a democracy, thank goodness, people can say, that's not working for us, we're gonna change it. We're gonna raise taxes way up, we're gonna do some punitive things, retributive things, whatever it is, that'll make it harder to start businesses, will be a less dynamic society, ultimately a less free society. And I think what we're trying to show the world is there's another model that is way more inclusive and broad-based and can share the wealth, if you will, with employees, vendors, et cetera. So I like to think that we're kind of part of a mission here to try to do that, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
I'd say focus long term. It's a rare thing, I think.
And get behind, I've been trying to push in Massachusetts, for example, the state to have an employee ownership center to help companies explore ESOPs, for example. Employee ownership is an incredibly bipartisan issue. It's pro-capitalist, it's pro-labor, it works really for everybody. In some states, Vermont has a very active employee ownership center. I don't know if Utah does or not, or wherever you're from, but getting behind that at a local level, because they call it the gray tsunami that's coming with people like me. The baby boomers retiring and selling their businesses. And selling to an ESOP is a great option for a business owner. And the business owner can get liquidity. The employees end up with the business. There are tax advantages, but no one knows it. Very few people know about it. Or they think they've read about, well, the Tribune, wasn't Tribune an ESOP and that was a disaster? United Airlines back in the 70s. And it sticks with people that it doesn't work. It does work in the right businesses. And so I think employee ownership is a very powerful model for companies to follow. And there are hundreds of thousands of businesses that will be sold in the next 5 years that could become ESOPs, and that could help with the movement.
And then you get paid.
Then you get paid with tax advantages. Thank you all very much.